So today, for my talk, I wanted to start by, of course, acknowledging, how much the situation with the coronavirus, has changed just since my talk last Sunday. It's really difficult to comprehend, how much this virus has, disrupted our society, not to mention the entire world. I recently heard a child psychologist comment how concerned he was for children and teens. His point was that because children and teens, have been born after, modern catastrophes like 9/11, for example, that they haven't experienced disruption on this scale before. And so the point was supposedly that we adults are better, able to handle this virus because of our past experience, and I guess that's probably a good point. And those of you who are parents, of children and teens, should, hopefully you can do something. You should do what you can to ease their anxiety. But one thing that I was personally thinking about was that, if they're your kids, right, then you can at least give them a hug, right? My son and daughter-in-law, they don't live with us, so because of that, and because my son and daughter-in-law are, obviously protecting their child, our grandson. So we haven't been able to see our grandson in person, much less give him a hug. And also I would argue that even those of us, that are old enough to remember, previous global crises, in fact, in my case, many global crises, as well as, local disasters like earthquakes and, wildfires and so forth. But even us who are older, we've never witnessed anything quite like this pandemic, and quite something on this scale before. I saw an interview recently with the mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Eric Garcetti. He, once again reaffirmed this mandatory stay-at-home order, for all non-essential businesses and services. And as he put it, quote, "At the end of the day, social distancing measures are the most important thing that we can do. Will we have hundreds and thousands of deaths, or will we have hundreds of thousands of deaths? That's what keeps me up. Everything I do is through that lens. Everything else can be rebuilt. Everything else can be replaced, but a life can never be replaced." End quote. That's a quote from Mayor Eric. I also read an article in the Atlantic magazine recently that put this need for social distancing in a different way. And the way that this article put it was, quote, "Think of it this way. There are now only two groups of Americans. Group A includes everyone involved in the medical response, whether they're treating patients, running tests, or manufacturing supplies. Group B includes everyone else, and their job is to buy Group A more time. Group B must now flatten the curve by physically isolating themselves from other people to cut off chains of transmission," end quote. So, I think we've been witnessing, certainly the numbers of people infected with the coronavirus, rise, and unfortunately the numbers of deaths have risen. And I think we're all, certainly getting a better understanding of this virus's very contagious nature. And so this, I think, is, influencing life even on the local community level, of course. So, for example, I live about 20 miles east of downtown Los Angeles in a small suburb known as Covina. And so, even here, first there was a difficulty, that I had, maybe a week or two ago when it finally actually it sunk, it sinked into me that all of our favorite neighborhood restaurants, were closed for closed to in-restaurant dining. And this is unfortunately leading to the downsizing and even the closure of some of these restaurants that can't sustain themselves just on, say, takeout alone. These are places where my wife and I are on first name basis with the waiters, and so they're like our friends, really. So that was difficult to deal with. But also, some of you may know that my wife and I are not especially adept at cooking at home, so this threat to our local restaurants is particularly difficult, in this bedroom community of Covina, where frankly there were not very many restaurants to begin with, even before this pandemic. So it's been particularly difficult on that level. But then a couple of days ago, we went to our local grocery store. We had to get some food supplies. We probably maybe like you, we've been going to our grocery store more often than usual. Because recently we were running low on paper goods, and every time we had gone there, and we went maybe every day for a while, we found all the shelves in the paper aisle, were bare. Fortunately, we just a couple of days ago we actually were able to find some paper towels, but just this past week, I think things seem to have changed again. When I was entering the store, I took some time to wipe down the handle of the shopping cart, with the sanitizing wipes that the store provides. I don't usually do that. Okay, actually, I've never done that before. But now you better believe that I'm definitely become a wiper. And it's kind of funny because when I used to see people doing this, now no offense if you yourself are a wiper, but I kind of judgmentally look at those people that were doing that, and I kind of shake my head and go, sheesh, but now I'm doing it too, and actually, I probably should have been doing it all along. So that's maybe a good thing that's come out of this pandemic. But then, what really caught my attention was that I just finished wiping the handle, of the cart, and I was about to go forward into the store, but I paused because there was this lady who was like maybe 10 feet to my left, and obviously she was intending to cross in front of me. She wanted to go this way, and so I motioned to her, go ahead, cross in front of me, but she refused. I mean, her body language seemed to be saying something like, I'm not taking any chances with you, buddy. So, I mean, how do you not take that personally, ouch, but, it was also pretty clear, that because of our increasing worries about the coronavirus, people seem to be much more careful about maintaining, that all-important 6 feet of social distance at all times. In this store, and in this particular store, the aisles are not 6 feet wide. They're maybe like 5 feet wide, and so this creates what I call some rather uncomfortable passing scenarios, like where people are passing, they're kind of like, like that. But maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but no, definitely I there's a certain amount of caution, and discomfort that we're feeling around each other these days. It's kind of it's necessary, I suppose, but it's also kind of disturbing. But then, I think on the other hand, I also noticed something in this particular store the last time that we went that was, I would say, was a very thoughtful change that the store had instituted. So I don't know if other stores have done this, but like basically overnight, this store rerouted the checkout area from the usual 5 or 6 checkout lines to one bank line. They improvised a kind of a bank line, and then they marked its path with tape marks, on the floor at 6 foot intervals. And so, this, kind of like this improvised bank line, at my local market, in the scheme of things, it might not seem that significant. But when I think about the kind of thought that must have gone through some employee's head, in its own small way, I think it is significant. I suppose it could have been, instituted as a directive from upper management, but I kind of doubt that. And actually, I'd like to think that this was the initiative of some, ordinary employee, someone, who, like all of us, is of course aware of the seriousness of this pandemic, but also, and I think this is the more significant part, someone who probably noticed the discomfort, and confusion that customers were having, in the checkout lines, and likely this was somebody who also noticed that, not everyone got the memo about 6 feet of social distancing. So like, what do you do if, you're in the checkout line and someone behind you is within your 6 feet of space? Do you nudge yourself closer to the person in front of you and then make that person uncomfortable? That kind of confusion existed. So this store, instituting this bank line with the 6 foot markings clearly marked out, I think was really, a good and thoughtful change. So I'd like to think that this thoughtful employee, taking into consideration all this stuff that's going on, just spontaneously made the suggestion, hey, why don't we reroute the checkout lines into a bank line and clearly mark the 6 foot separations. And and then this is all speculation on my part, but I think that this employee was. I'd like to think that this employee was not necessarily the store's employee of the month, the one that gets their picture on the wall, or even somebody who was like a devout member of their local church. But I'd like to think that their action is just like, the many acts of thoughtfulness and kindness and generosity that are being reported in the news these days. Along with the disturbing news about the spread of the virus, there are also these news stories about people that are stepping up and just trying to help each other out, however they can. And ultimately, I think this employee's action was actually initiated simply by being aware of something going on around them that's much bigger than themselves. Something that, in a very real sense, is something that we are all a part of. And so let me take a moment here to share with you my understanding of what this, something bigger is. So, if you're a longtime member of the temple, there's many ways that I could discuss this, but I was thinking that since we chanted the Shoshinge earlier, I'd like to refer to the opening line of the Shoshinge, which is Kimyo Muryoju Nyorai. And this line is often understood as simply being another way to state the name of Amida Buddha, who is the Buddha in the temple's altar in our main temple downtown, and also the Buddha that's in my home Obutsudan here. We're probably more familiar with the name of this Buddha in the form of Namo Amida Butsu, right? But it's significant that in this line, Kimyo Muryoju Nyorai, the word Kimyo also has this meaning of calling. And Shinran, who's the founder of our Jodo Shinshu tradition, once clarified the meaning of Kimyo, as he put it, quote, in the term Kimyo, ki means to arrive at, and myo means to invite, to command and summon. And then since Muryoju Nyorai refers to the Buddha of infinite life, and our understanding of in Shin Buddhism is that this Buddha of infinite life is essentially represents infinite life itself, or the reality of infinite life. So because of that, Kimyo Muryoju Nyorai can be understood as a calling or a command, meaning reunite your life with immeasurable life. Recognize your life as being one with all life. And so, personally, I think that even though, we as normal, unenlightened human beings, usually we only see things from the narrow view of our own, self-survival. But it's at times of crisis like the one that we're currently experiencing that we naturally, I think, become more aware of our interconnectedness with all other lives. And we begin to realize that rather than each of us, living separate, independent lives, each of us is really sharing this one great, immeasurable life. This one immeasurable life, this oneness of all life is, I think, the Buddha Dharma. That's something much bigger than each of us. And so, even, as the news about the coronavirus, seems to worsen each day, at the same time, there also seem to be increasing examples of, thoughtful acts of kindness and generosity by, everyday, ordinary people. And so personally, this gives me a sense of hope in our collective ability to get through these difficult times together. Or maybe to put it another way, I would say that while this pandemic is certainly, socially distancing us, because we are all becoming more aware of the impermanence and interconnectedness of all life, we are also actually being brought closer together. So that's my message for today, and thank you very much for listening.